Hey guys, thanks for joining me, and if you like what you see, please subscribe.
Hello, peoples. Welcome to Sharp Ends. Today I'm going to be breaking down this SpydieChef. The SpydieChef was designed by Sleesh. There is his symbol right there, famous for the Sleesh Bowie, and of course the SpydieChef. What makes this knife really incredible is it's made in their Taiwan factory, which is arguably the best factory that Spyderco has. And it is made of LC200N, which is supposed to be near rust proof. It actually did rust for me because I left some salt water and sand on it for about a week, and when I got home there was just a little bit of rust here, which I was very surprised about. Same thing, I had left some on a Magna Cut blade, but there was no rust on it. That's this guy here. Now I wiped it off easily with cloth, but I'm curious to see what the inside of this looks like and if there's any rust in there too. Little tip: if you do go sailing or you do use your knife in a saltwater environment, it won't rust in the short term. Anything is pretty much like a suggestion that it won't rust. I suggest that you take a water bottle, and if you're going to not have a chance to tear down your knife, just rinse it off with fresh water. At least then it will get that salt and sand off. So the SpydieChef, I don't remember if I've ever taken this apart or not. So this should be fun. It does not have any liners. The scales on it are what the bearings, I believe, run on. So let's see if that's true. This is a frame lock. Let's check the centering real fast. I do feel a little bit of grit in there, and it's slightly off to the show side. I did notice that the blade, there is no blade play, but the screw is a little loose. So let's see if we can make it perfectly centered when we're done, or not. We'll see. I'm going to go ahead and have this knife extended, and then I am going to go ahead and break the lock. This is looks like it's a locking pivot. So in other words, I don't need two screwdrivers, Torx heads, bits at the same time, because the pivot probably has a D shape to it, which keeps it from free spinning. I'm going to put the pivot bolt up here. You can see it has a lot of Loctite on it, and then I am going to try to push out this pivot bolt. And what I use for that is this spring bar tool from a Weehaw, or I can't remember what the name of the, well, anyway, all of my tools are down below in the description if you would like to get any of them. Here is the pivot, and as I said, it does indeed have a little D shape to it, and that's going to fit into the scale. And that D part, socket part, female section, needs to go in the show scale side, I believe it was. All right, and now I'm going to do these back ones. This front one, I believe, was a T8. Yep. And the back is a T6. It has 3 barrel spacers, and then it has a pivot, and then it has a lanyard tube. Lanyard tubes on Spydercos usually make me want to cry. We'll see if this one's bad. And I am working from the front to the back. There's definitely some schmutz here. I'm putting the screws in order up here from where I take them out, so I know this is the pivot, and then we work backwards. The SpydieChef is well renowned for a lot of reasons. Great shape, flicks open really nicely. You can't Spydie flick it with your middle finger, but it works really well. The geometry works really well to open it with your thumb. I do see a little bit of, I won't call it rust, but patina-ine going on here where the washers are. That was one thing that I was really worried about. And now I have this loose, and this should just come up if I work it really carefully. The only thing that would be holding it would be like the lanyard tube, perhaps. It is moving around, and I'm just going to carefully just keep moving it back and forth. The lanyard tube might cause me some problems. The lanyard tube came out with the show scale side. Here's the lanyard tube. Let's not forget to put that back in. Don't want it to roll away either. So let's take a look at these pieces. You know, not that bad. The titanium here, we've got some patina in here, and then you can see, I don't know if you can see, but definitely some salt here. And then let's remove the washer, and yeah, it looks fine. It looks fine. Not really any rust to speak of. And then if we look here, you can see where the two different kind of metals met. There's a difference in potential or polarity. There's a little bit of patina and rust going on there, but still nothing that you would expect. Definitely salt and sand in here. And I definitely swam with this a couple of times in my life jacket, which, you know, sometimes when you're in certain situations, you need to be able to do that, right? You need to be able to wear your safety gear with a knife on in salt water, and that's just what happens. So you got to buy the right knife for that. I'm taking some alcohol here. I'm cleaning out the inside of the pivot, the back side, and over here too. And just because this has been in salt water, what I'm going to do, making sure I get all this grit and grime off of there, is I'm going to take a towel as well, and I'm going to take some alcohol, and I'm just going to clean the whole blade with this rubbing alcohol. I've got these little plastic containers here that I got off of Amazon. They're just these little, I don't know how many ounce things, and I've written on top of it what it is. 91% isopropyl alcohol. I've also got another one with mineral oil, and yeah. So I'm going to go through and just wipe the entire blade down now with alcohol. That's going to remove any last traces of salt and whatever else might be on here. So this knife performed really well out in the wild. Very easy action, easy to open one-handed, easy to close one-handed, and to clip back onto your life vest or your pants. So I was very thankful for that. You can see where the washers, these are phosphor bronze washers, are starting to make some places where they're wearing on the blade. And again with this, what I'm going to do is, this is, I believe, a ceramic ball bearing, but I see sand in there. So I'm going to try to keep track of which side the phosphor bronze washer is. These are nice phosphor bronze washers too. Some are very thin. This one has a little bit of thickness to it, which I appreciate. I'm going to try to keep track of which side goes where on these guys, which side is down, which side is touching the scale, which side is touching the knife, just because it's already starting to wear in a pattern there, and I'd like to keep that the same. So I'm going to keep them like that, and then I know that the side that it is down is the side that goes back on. I'm going to take one of my rags again, get some more alcohol, and then I'm just going to rub the whole scale down. This stop pin right here will come out, so you got to be careful about that. Getting everything lined back up sometimes can be tricky with, and I'm making sure that I'm cleaning the front face here of the lock. One thing that this knife does not have is an overstop for the frame lock. In other words, you can accidentally push it too far out and bend it while you're opening it. Never done that, but it's something that higher end knives usually have some kind of way of preventing that. But this one doesn't. So I'm just going to clean all of this off with some alcohol. Both sides of them. All right, now we're ready to put this back together. Today I'm going to use knife pivot lube. You can find the link down below. Another good option, it's a little bit cheaper, is Hops No. 9 gun oil. But today I'm going to use my knife pivot lube. The alcohol also dries really, really fast, so there's no worry about, you don't obviously want to apply any oil on top of a alcohol or anything like that. So I'm just going to put a drop here, and I didn't even squeeze the tube. I just kind of put it there. And then I'm going to, and you know, it just a little bit came out, and that's all I really need. I'm gonna put some there, and then I'm going to put a little bit on top of the washer, a little bit on top of the washer, and then I believe that the pivot here, which I never really washed off, so I'm just going to go ahead and take my Q-tip and make sure that the pivot itself is clean and that there is no more sand or salt on the pivot part. I believe we said that goes on the show scale side. And we should be able to see a D component. Yeah, so on the lock side, there is a D cutout. On the show scale side, there is no D. The D, or the part of the pivot, needs to face exactly backwards. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that roughly where it needs to go. And then getting it into its final position is just a matter of tweaking it back and forth. I'm now going to put some of the pivot lube on the pivot itself. And now the blade is ready to go back on. I've put the lube on the washers and on the pivot itself, so I don't need to put any in here, and I'm not going to worry about the track for the detent ball. I do no longer put any kind of heavy oil or anything on the detent ball or the face of that, because I feel like it creates lock stick and it just works better without it. I sometimes would put a little bit of the heavy knife pivot lube, just a drop of it in where the detent ball would rest, but I don't think you need that anymore. So I've just changed the way I do it. Now, we need to remember to put in the lanyard tube, and we need to remember to put in the stop pin. And then this needs to be all the way back against the stop pin, and then I'm going to put this over and then try to get the D to line up with the part there. Now, you might be afraid of the washer falling off, but it won't, because the viscosity will hold the bearing on there for you. Not the bearing, the washer. And so when I'm getting this lined up, I can see the D part, and I can see it's not quite lined up the way that I want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold it pretty darn close. All right, so it clicked into place. I don't think the D, though, is in the right place. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my Torx, and I'm just going to turn this a little bit while I'm watching this side until it clicks in. Did it go in? Oh, maybe it did go in. Okay, yeah, it went in. Great. I just made that look a lot easier than sometimes it is. So, you know, sometimes that D won't click in there. So if you kind of sandwich it together and hold it, and then you turn from the other side, it'll click in the rest of the way. All right. So finally, I am going to take some of my spring bar tool again, and I'm going to take some light or medium Loctite, and I'm going to put it on the inside of the threads. And I will do the same thing on the other side once I get the pivot in. Did not have any trouble with the tube, the lanyard tube this time. That was good. Going to tighten it up. And I'm going to over tighten it a little bit. So it's all tightened up. Not I didn't like force it down, but I did tighten it down pretty darn gosh good. I noticed some sand inside the lanyard tube hole, so I'm going to use a Q-tip just to get that cleaned out. There we go. And next I need to put some of my Loctite inside the threads for the standoffs in the back. Has 3 standoffs. A lot of knives only have 2. Those are kind of for light use. Some knives have 4. The ones that have 4 standoffs, these guys right here, not including the lanyard tube, are made for higher use impact jobs. They obviously are not fixed blades, so you can't use them like that. By the same token, you shouldn't be afraid of using something that has 3 or 4 standoffs more roughly. Something like this Eclipse by Hinder has 3 nice big, and you see how wide it is, that kind of displaces kind of like large forces. It's meant to take a lot of brute force, whereas something like, you know, urban buoy, obviously it's very small, but it only has 2 standoffs, and that's usually the typical amount of standoffs that a knife has. Here's a Caviso Mini, Keen Mini, and here you can see this one actually only has one, well, it has 2 screws. One of them is extra long one from the clip here, but yeah, so anyway. All right, so those now have a little bit of pivot in it, and I'm going to work from the back and use the same screws. I don't think it really matters, but just being organized and having rebuilt a lot of motors and things of that nature, I've learned that you should always take things apart in a methodical and logical way so that when you put it back together, it goes back together the exact same way. Because if you accidentally use a screw that's just a little bit too long in one of the holes or something like that, it can cause a lot of big problems down the road. That Loctite is going to now need 24 hours to cure and dry, but before it does that, we have a window of opportunity to play with the pivot and get the tension right on that. So I'm just going to open this and close it, and I'm going to see how are we doing on centerness. The centerness is almost exactly the same when we started. It is off just a little bit to the show side. Despite it being Loctite, well, not Loctite, but pretty darn tight, it's opening super smooth. And I don't mind it being, yeah, that's pretty great. You can see despite, like with the thumb, what I'm doing is I'm not flipping straight forward with this. The geometry of this is such that I'm actually flicking out away like that. And that is what gets me that nice flick. When I first got the SpydieChef, it was, I couldn't do that. It was a little bit too tight, hadn't worked in yet, and I had to roll it out, which is fine too. And there's no opportunity with the frame lock to be able to flick it. Well, yeah, there's really no opportunity because the frame lock is blocking that. Cool. So I don't think I need to adjust the pivot. And as far as it not being perfectly centered, I guess there's one thing I could try real fast, and I'll go ahead and try that. I'm going to take a piece of scrap or a direction book from a knife, another knife, and I'm going to jam that in here on the side of the blade, pushing it over to the direction I want, which is towards the lock. Usually if you have any kind of frame lock or liner lock, what you usually need to do is push it into the lock, because the lock is the part that is provides a detent and is pushing sideways on the blade, therefore creating enough friction for you to flick it open nicely, right? So now I forced it over the direction that I need it to go. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the 3 screws that I just tightened down, and I'm going to loosen them a little bit. And I'm going to take the pivot, I'm going to loosen that a little bit. And now I am going to take it, and while it is over, I'm also going to twist it a little bit while I work on this to get it over, right? I'm twisting it, I'm pushing it the direction it wants to go. I'm going to tighten down the lock really well, the pivot really well. And now I'm going to tighten down these guys really well. And I didn't touch the other screws on the other side, but I'm just going to make sure that they're still tight. They are still very tight. Might as well check the T8 on the clip. All right, and now I'm going to remove this, and hopefully it's more toward center. So it did help a little bit, but it's still a little bit to the show side, but yeah. Let's see. Not quite drop shutty. I don't think I want to loosen the pivot though. I'm fine with closing it manually. And if I loosen the pivot a little bit to get it so that it drop shuts more, it'll just become less lined up. And I don't, I'd rather it be tight. And also it's going to wear in a little bit more. No lock stick, works perfectly well. Lockup is pretty good. Thanks so much for joining me today. If you liked what you saw, please like and subscribe. You can also follow me on Instagram, and you can also support the channel to become a channel member here on YouTube and follow or on Patreon as well. Getting really close to 1,000 subscribers, at which point I will be giving away a lot of knives. So I hope that you take the time to go ahead and subscribe now. I will see you guys next time. Have a great, wonderful rest of your week. Bye-bye now.